Alright, so now that we have the nozzles level to each other and to the bottom of this mounting bracket, and it's not the ideal thing. Ideally we would level the table to the gantry using one nozzle and then use the table that's parallel to the gantry to level these two nozzles, but the set screws, we can't get access to those when the motors are on. So instead we have to use that little bracket. So after you finish that, we're going to reassemble it. Now while we're reassembling it, we're going to add some enhancements to the system. So one thing we noticed pretty quick is that when you just have this floating above that little acrylic plate, so you have this black acrylic plate that sits on the top, when you just have it floating above this, it actually will snap off the wires. We had that happen to the fan, we had to reconnect it. So we want to avoid that from happening, so we have this little pretty guy here that has a support for the cord, keeps that rigid. It also has, instead of a press fitting, press style fitting, let's see if I can get it on there. So the black one has a press fitting where you just slide the tube right in it. The orange one, you won't be able to slip the tube in there because it's too small. It's 5 millimeters, the tap drill size for a 6 millimeter thread. So we're actually going to tap that. I'm going to do that first off. I'm going to tap that with the 6 millimeter, 1 millimeter pitch thread cutting tool, a tap, and I'm using my nice clutched tap handle. But the idea is basically to get that thread started, and we have some press to connect fittings that we can use to help us keep our filament in. It just helps with the overall quality of the print by keeping things cleaner and so on. Now fortunately I can't show you that because I don't have those parts here today. I can kind of show you what they look like. I'll pull it out later. But first thing, you just gotta tap these parts, and the trick is you gotta keep a good amount of pressure on it, otherwise the tap just wants to spin. It doesn't want to actually cut. Try to keep it as perpendicular as possible. Eventually it'll lead itself. Yeah, looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be too perfect. Just lines up loosely with the holes from the extruder gear itself. Just go ahead and put that all the way through. Now you want to be careful when you're doing that. You don't let the thread just spin out towards the top, because you'll end up stripping it. And finally, when you're done, just want to grab a knife, and there's a little bit of a rise from the thread. Just want to take that and just run the razor blade over it, or your knife or whatever, and get that as flush as you can. So again, I kind of paired them off, right with right, left with left. Make sure everything stays consistent, otherwise you'll start frying things. So just gotta unscrew your fan from the stepper that you put together temporarily. And then again, you have the fan and the heat sink with little spacers, and then the two screws. And in the heat sink's a hole that fits the front of the stepper, and you can see the spring that puts friction onto the filament while the gear, this little a hobbed gear, pushes the filament forward. So I'm going to put the fan and the heat sink through the holes of the manifold. Okay, and screw those into the stepper. Once you have it, you want to get it snug. You don't want to over tighten it too much. You can collapse the fan, and for the most part, it won't come on loose. So you just Get her snug, and do the same thing with the left side. Alright, so before I put the left extruder on, I'm just going to take off the fan. I'm also going to unplug this black cable. Now I don't have to worry about keeping track because my right cable, the white one, I marked R, the stepper was marked R. For right, we should be fine. Shouldn't mix it up. But I'm going to go ahead and take off the fan. And it's just a lot easier to do this, add this support bracket when the motors aren't together, because you want these wires from the fan to go on either side. Now we are going to cut these wires and put switches in line so that these can be easily changed out in the future. But if you don't have to change them out, or if you don't have plugs, it's just easier if you can take things apart to get access to them. So now I can slide the stepper in. We're going to go ahead and put these two screws in. Okay, so those are those two longer screws. As you can see on the plastic part, there's two different heights. The longer screw will go in the taller height, and these just feed down to that aluminum block manifold. Now they might be a little bit resistant, so you might have to push a little bit, but you shouldn't be tapping the plastic at this point. So now before I really crank these things down and lock it in, I want to make sure that both the cables for my extruder are not being clamped down by this. We could pinch them off. So just make sure there's nothing underneath these, nothing underneath the plastic. Now another thing you want to watch out for, it's going to be hard to see, but we'll try our best. So if you look at the holes, you can see a little bit of reflection in there. They don't line up perfectly. That's okay. They'll be just fine. It's just when you're tightening it, you want to kind of push it so that the holes are as centered as possible. Like I said, you're not going to get it perfect, but you can get it close. Alright, so now it's nice and secure. We can actually kind of pop this cable into it, and there's little loops there to zip tie it.